to really be scared here.
Johnny.
You're still afraid.
I'm Jack Carey and this is First Frights, the show where I ask people to tell me about the very first film that scared them. This episode, I'm here with the lovely Aled Owen, director, writer, producer of the award-winning Milk Killers.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Are you a horror fan, Aled, would you say?
No, not really, no. Yes, definitely. Big horror fan. I think I sort of went off it for a few years in my teens because I had a sort of early introduction into horror. Got very desensitized to a lot of the actual scares. Became a bit of a snob about modern horror and kind of felt a bit like, horror's not good anymore, and went off it. Went more down sort of comedy, dark comedy. Still, it sort of fueled that fire for me. But sort of rediscovering a lot of the underground stuff of the 70s or the sort of European art house horror and things like that kind of reintroduced me to it in my late teens, early 20s. And then as a filmmaker, I'm predominantly, a horror filmmaker. So I've really kind of re-embraced that part of me and just full.
And your film Milk Killers that's just come out, what were some of the big horror influences for you on that film?
Okay, so The Milk Killers is a play on very much the giallo Italian 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s horror. Actually Melon Pictures, my production company, melon being the Welsh word for yellow, giallo being the Italian word for yellow. It's very much a reference to that. But yeah, the sort of the synth scores and the sort of unnatural, horribly kind of man-made, like colored gels lighting every scene, especially when it gets a bit funky and it gets a bit supernatural. All that stuff really plays into The Milk Killers. And then plot-wise and character-wise, I think that's where I kind of marry the older stuff that I got into later in my teens with the stuff that got me into horror in the first place. So the characters and the plot are very much linked to I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream, Urban Legend, Final Destination, those kind of things that were coming out when I was a bit younger.
And it's got that, what I love about it is that central cast as an all-female cast is very sort of like The Descent in it, sort of, and it's following them, going into that town. It does, for me, that feels so reminiscent of that kind of wave you said of horror films, all kind of very female powered.
Yeah, I think horror is sort of a weird one. It seems to be the only genre where female main characters have become the norm. I think obviously it may have problematic sort of origin as to why, because obviously I think Dario Argento once said, if I'm going to watch people die on screen, I'd rather it be sexy naked ladies, because somebody's going to have to die on screen. I prefer looking at them.
The arch feminist.
No, but it's funny how these sort of this sort of systematic way of making films and objectifying certain groups in horror. It's weird that that's also the genre that's kind of come full circle and is now at the cutting edge of, it represents, Jordan Peele's doing a lot of black stories through the lens of horror. A lot of female filmmakers are sort of reclaiming the female gaze. And last night I watched the recent remake, the 2021 remake of Slumber Party Massacre. And I won't spoil it for you, but it's sort of, part of it's so bad it's good. Like you're laughing at the plot holes, but it's also like quite clever. It's very much done through the female gaze. The men in the other cabin are the bimbos, and they're the ones having the sort of shirtless pillow fights and stuff, and it's all very homoerotic and stuff. And it's brilliant. It's nice to see what sort of that horror has always been the outsiders genre, hasn't it? So I think that's why people who kind of feel less represented by the mainstream stuff tend to kind of gravitate towards that.
And before we kind of jump into it, what were your kind of first entry, kind of your gateway drugs into the horror?
Well, I have an older sister who also has a twisted sense of humor. and she was 4 years older than me, and still is. And she would give me hand-me-down horrors, hand-me-down DVDs. So basically, it was whatever scared her that she would watch on her own in her room, and it was still not maybe age appropriate for her, but more age appropriate for her. She would then go, well, I've been traumatized by this, so I have to traumatize my little brother with this. So I'd get a lot of Saw. I'd get a lot of, those sort of torture, gore porn, torture porn type stuff, like what we're going to talk about today. And then before that, I think my dad kind of early on sat us down and tried to scare us by watching Nightmare on Elm Street, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and The Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock Birds. And I think at the time, you're so young, and you I think as a parent, you maybe don't realize how much these things have aged. But I was sort of going, what, this scared you? God, what a, like, really? This is what scared you back in the day? You can't handle horror at all. I'm watching Saw. Yeah, I was like, come on, you can see that that's corn syrup. But it was great. It was, it was an education into that. And then he'd put stuff on, then thinking, oh, they can handle it. So we watched something that isn't technically a horror film. We watched the 50s, 60s Lord of the Flies. And I was the age more or less of the kids in horrible. And so that's when I realized, okay, actually, I'm not scared of killer birds. I'm not scared of people in my dreams. I'm scared of human beings. I'm scared of what people can do under the right circumstances. And that's why I clicked that your sort of paranormal activities didn't really get me. Your Conjurings, they fun films to watch, but they never really got me in that sense. The stuff that really kind of got under my skin was always the strangers. Why are you breaking into my house and tormenting me? Just because we can. And this is what we do. And I'm like, my inability to understand why you would do that and why I have to be the victim of that is the scariest thing. So it's always been the human element. And that's really what I tried to play with in The Male Killers as well in my film.
And one of the things I want to ask you is, when your sister was passing these films on to you, were they DVDs? Because I feel like what we've lost recently, not to sound like a kind of old man yells at cloud, but is that amazing thing of, I remember going into, shops or having them in the house and looking at DVD covers and being more scared shitless of the covers, because it's imagining what that film could be from those couple of images.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's where a lot of iconography comes from. I mean, we think of Jaws, we think of the poster. We think of there are images that it's the same as when you listen to an album. I'm not sure everybody's like this, but I'm very visual. So when I listen to an album, if I know what the album cover looks like, that's what I'm seeing in my head. If the first time I heard a song was the music video, that's what I'm watching in my head when I listen to the song. If I heard a song in a film for the first time, that's, I'm hearing Gimme Shelter, I'm picturing pick any Scorsese film. But that's the world it's putting me into. And so, yeah, I think we've kind of lost that idea that we can boil down these whole stories into one image or images on the back of a DVD box or a tagline on a poster, because really you kind of click on it, you watch it, you forget about it, you click on the next thing, or it auto plays the next thing. We've kind of lost that. But yeah, it's the hand-me-down horror thing. I feel a loss, because I always loved when people would gift you a story. It's a bit, it's the same with books, but less so, I feel like, because maybe there's a stigma about getting a book for your birthday or whatever. But I love watching a film, being moved by it, thinking, oh, do you know who'd love this? Jack. I'm going to get Jack this film. Yeah, but I can't really get Jack this film unless I don't know, give him a Netflix gift card and tell him he has to use it to watch this film. And by that point, it might be off Netflix or whatever. So we've lost that. Now, if I give someone a DVD, they'll go, oh, great, thanks. Now I've got to find my DVD player. I've got to go dig that out of the garage.
Yeah, plug it in. Yeah. So I guess that sort of segues into my next question, which is, Aled, what was the first film that really scared you?
First film that really scared me was Hostel Part 2. I hadn't seen Hostel Part 1. But this was one of those DVDs that my sister had, and again, talking about the DVD case, the iconic image is the character of Lorna upside down, and just it gives just enough away that you're like, why is she upside down? What's going on? Why is she screaming? What does this have to do with a hostel? So yeah, I was fascinated by it from the start, and then I think I must have watched it one afternoon as a young teen, probably too young. Very human horror, and it speaks to a lot of scary things about people, not just what they can physically do, but also just systemic things and how impersonal and faceless that can be. It was horrible. It really got under my skin.
And can you kind of take me back to that experience? What do you remember of it? You know, of putting that on and watching it.
My memory of watching it is quite different to actually when I rewatched it recently to talk about it, because I don't think I'd watched it in about 10, 15 years. And I sort of misremembered what was happening when, because to me, the memory I have of it is being in my room, watching it on my Xbox or PlayStation or whatever it would have been, with the lights off, the curtains closed, and just kind of being wide-eyed, jaw-dropped, witnessing people doing these horrible things to these girls, and also kind of somehow coming out at the end of it going, yeah, there's a bit of like empowerment in there at the end, and a sort of a happy ending, I guess, of sorts. But it just felt like I'd witnessed, heavy metal for the first time, or sort of, just been injected with this rush of not only like people do this in real life, but also you can make films like this. This was not The Birds.
That's so interesting, because I think weirdly I can sort of remember first watching it, and again, this is slightly a nostalgic look back at the way we view media, is that it was one of those films that I would periodically see bits of on Film 4, or like Film 4+1 late at night, and you'd flick through it and go, oh wow. So I remember seeing this almost kind of like, I guess, how people watch films on TikTok now, where I'd see it in sort of 20-minute bursts. And then sort of, but even then, those scenes are so visceral.
I don't think there is a 20-minute burst in there that doesn't give you a full idea of what that film is, which I can't say about the first Hostel, because the first Hostel is a lot slower. Obviously, it expects you not to know what the premise behind Hostel is, so it takes its time getting there. It sets the tone. So there's a good, like, I could take a random 20 minutes of the first Hostel, and you wouldn't necessarily know what that film is. And I think that also speaks to Eli Roth as a filmmaker, and learning from your past experiences and pacing and things like that. And I've done the same now. I'm in development on my next feature, and I've done the same, having been in screenings of The Male Killers, that I'm now going, right, okay, I need to inject a little something there. I need to keep that a mystery until a little bit later. So it's any 20 minutes of Hostel Part 2 gives you a full taste of the full palette of what that film is from beginning to end, without necessarily just rehashing itself every 20 minutes.
Because I think personally, I love the second one. And I feel it's almost a sort of Terminator 2 out of the Hostel series, because it's a lot bigger. Obviously, it's got a bigger budget, but I feel it gives, what I love about it is the fact that you get to see for the first time, this dual narrative of the girls, and the fact that you go and meet the guys who are signing up to this program. So I wonder if maybe we just have a little, chat about the plot of the second a bit, and go through that. So obviously, the first one, it's a bunch of American kind of bro-y, passport bro, on their Euro trip.
Yeah, frat bros
on their Euro trip, and they get, they go stay at this hostel. They get kind of honey trapped by these two very good-looking Eastern European women, and they wake up in this kind of torture den where people are paying money to torture the kind of waifs and strays that have been kidnapped across Europe, which again is a fantastic schlocky grindhouse.
Oh yeah, it leans into all the things that Eli Roth grew up watching and fell in love with. Yeah, definitely. It's funny because when I first mentioned Hostel Hostel Part 2 as one of the first films that scared me to my friends in uni. One of my best friends in the world is from Slovakia. And I obviously, it had been 10 years even then when I'd watched it, and he went, oh, not Hostel. And this is quite surprising because even though we were in film school, he wasn't that big into films. He liked making films, but he wasn't that big into. He didn't know his stuff in the same way, and he wouldn't mind me saying so. So the fact that I'd mentioned Hostel and he was like, he knew what that was straight away, was quite surprising in itself. So I went, oh, what's wrong with Hostel? And I obviously hadn't clicked watching it as a young teen that it was set in Slovakia. And he's from Bratislava, where like the film is set. And so and he was like, oh no. Which is funny because now I look at a lot of how Wales is represented on screen. So many Welsh films that sort of actually make its way out of Wales tend to be the English language ones that are starring, your fantastic but English actors as Welsh mining town people, and it's just never the authentic, accurate representation of what Wales is. And I can only imagine if somebody made a film about if you go to Wales, you will die, that I would feel the same way. I wouldn't have watched the film. So my friend Lubos hadn't watched the film, but he just knew of it. It was infamous in Slovakia as...
Because I think the tourist board kicked off about it, didn't they? Massively.
After the first one. So I can't really understand how they let him do the second one.
Yeah, it is wild. But weirdly, I think it was... Both were filmed outside of Prague, which is obviously in the Czech Republic. So they were kind of catching a stray bullet there, Slovakia.
Yeah. So I can't remember if it was, I think it was Slovakia that offered Eli Roth an all expenses paid trip to Bratislava after making Hostel to show him and to try and reclaim a bit of that, bad blood, to sort of say, come and actually spend time in Bratislava. It's a great city. It's what's funny as well is so many of these, through the American lens, of course, and I think even through our lens in Wales, we'd look at a lot of these areas as Eastern European, and that's sort of the red curtain and the mysterious veil that goes on. The further east you go, the weirder people are, apparently, according to these films. But having spoken to Lubos, who's Slovakian, his girlfriend who's Hungarian, a lot of the countries that are labeled Eastern European in these films, they're like, we're not Eastern European, we're Central European. So even they've got this sort of this version of Eastern Europe that they don't subscribe to, that they think, oh no, the Eastern Europeans are different people completely. So it is fascinating how we kind of other those people. But that's also why I think the second film works so much better, is the horror is very focused on being these American or billionaire rich people characters coming in and using Central Europe or Eastern Europe as their sort of billionaire's playground where they can be above the law. And that's the scary thing, not the Liam Neeson Taken thing of like, American dads, don't let your American daughters go to France because you'll get sex trafficked. It is more of a thing in the second one of, it's still set just outside Bratislava. It's still shot just outside Prague. But ultimately, it's not about those people doing anything to you as such. I mean, there's a system there, of course, but they're all sort of they're all products of a business that's being run largely by foreign bodies, i.e. Americans and Brits and whoever else coming over and spending that money. So yeah, I think that's the scariest part of the whole thing, really.
100%. I think what's funny about that kind of cultural hangover is, I went on my first lad's holiday to Prague, and even then, Hostel had become a byword for kind of, watch out, boys, don't go to Eastern Europe. And it's at that time, Prague was kind of like the place to go for stag do's and lads' holidays. It was so weirdly, interestingly set up and catered for an international audience. But I'll just very quickly tell you, we ironically stayed in a hostel and we got stitched up because our friends had gone there about 6 months previous. And they said, oh, boys, yeah, go to this hostel. It's great. It's really cheap. They're really friendly there. Blah blah blah. So, okay, amazing. So booked it up. Oh, this is great. It's like £4 a night. This is amazing.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So we turn up and we get the taxi driver there. It's a taxi driver over there. He's checking his sat nav, and we're like, oh, this is quite a short drive from the airport. This is all right. And he pulls in, and it was just a bunch of shipping containers. They'd stuck together, knocked all the walls out of the shipping containers, and basically made a flat pack hostel. And I still remember the taxi driver pulling up outside and just going, fucking hell. and basically kicking us out of the taxi. And we went in there, and literally like hostel, you go in there, we got the keys, and opened the door, and the room, everything was wiped down. There was a drain on the floor.
It was like a wet room.
It was literally like a wet room. I thought, this is it, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
You see a drain in the middle of your room, you're not getting out of that room.
Yeah, luckily no one was, sort of decapitated or slowly tortured.
Yeah, that is lucky. Yeah.
But it is weird how that, even then, it's a bit like, I think for previous generations, that Midnight Express is held up as this sort of, when the West, visits all these sort of undeveloped countries, this is what could go wrong.
And I think that's the important distinction, is that this isn't preying on nothing. It's preying on fears about a very real thing. And it is tapping into something that should be, especially in Europe, quite a universal experience for, lads like us from a certain age, where that was the norm. We would go on lads' holidays and we'd do it cheap as chips, and all we cared about was the cost of a pint, and maybe seeing a couple of like buildings from the outside, not doing very many of the museums, but just having a bit of freedom for the first time in your life really was the whole point, and doing it somewhere where your money goes a bit further. But then obviously there are these scary parts to that that mainly go hand in hand with the fact that this is your first taste of freedom, and that you are going to overcompensate for that, and you are going to take things too far. And that, obviously means that you're going to be spending the night in a really cheap hostel or hotel. So it does prey on something and take it a bit further. And I'm all for that. It's obviously the sensitivity of what you inadvertently say then. What does that accidentally say when somebody's reading that script or watching that film? And it's quite easily slipping into the territory of, if you go to Slovakia, you'll die. So that's why I think the second one is the Godfather Part 2 of this. Between the dual narrative, the nuance of everything it tackles, not perfect at all, doesn't avoid all of the landmines, but it very much feels like a more thought out, more sensitively made version of the first one. And not that I clocked that when I first watched it back in the day, because I hadn't seen the first Hostel, and B, I wasn't watching it for that. I was more mortified by the people. But I think it says a lot that watching Hostel Part 2, even at that young age, what I got from it wasn't Slovakia, Eastern Europe, hostels in general. What I got from it was sex trafficking exists, and the sort of murderous version of that's in this film, and that these underground communities and sort of people who see themselves as better than or bigger than or more or above the law very much exist. And that's, I think, what I got from that film, and that's why it was so scary. Whereas if I'd watched the first one at that age, I don't know if I'd gotten that. I don't know if I'd have had that scare from it, because even though it's the same premise, I would have seen it more as the sort of tasteless, mistimed, mistoned, if you go to Eastern Europe, you'll die idea,
Yeah, and I think, I guess getting into the plot of the second a bit more is, as you said, that first one was very much frat bros abroad. It's almost a cautionary tale of this is what happens when you get too drunk, you do some drugs, and you try and get off with a few girls. Where I feel, the second one is obviously, it's still the Americans abroad. This time it's three women. And then we also, the dual narrative, as you said, splits between these two kind of like American Psycho-y, Gordon Gekko, salary guys who are going out to participate as if they would do a golf trip or go fishing.
It's like, come on, we haven't been golfing for ages, or come on, we haven't been to Vegas in a while. Or it's that feeling, isn't it? It's very normalizing.
It is, and I think they are such interesting characters. Those two guys, you know, the fact that it's for them, it's very much them grappling with their own masculinity, and how this is, as you said, this is seen as a rite of passage that will allow them to, succeed in their personal lives or their, in their kind of in the corporate life as well.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the idea of, having your darker desires validated. It's the idea of, these are guys who have probably started off going to strip clubs and have tested the waters with each other. Is there someone I can go to a strip club with and he's going to be discreet about it when we go have dinner with our wives later on? They've obviously graduated to prostitutes at some point. Then they've probably graduated to sort of specialist prostitutes that, they can do other things to, or that will do other things to them. That may be, I know prostitution, depending on where you are in the world, is illegal, but I can imagine they'd have taken that step on top of that then, where even illegal stuff is being done in that illegal environment. And obviously this sort of to them feels like the natural progression of what they've been doing. And so they're almost psyching themselves up by going, well, you have to do it with me. We have to both do it so that I don't feel out of my depth, and also so that, we can keep each other secret. And there's this sort of weird twisted bonding thing to it. Yeah. But are we going into spoilers?
I think we can spoil. Yeah.
I think the best thing about that storyline is the subversion of those two characters.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So you start off with the very masculine, taller, more confident figure being the one egging the other one on, saying, come on, your wife doesn't have to know, tell her you're on a business trip. Come on, we can do this. And psyching him up the whole time they're abroad. And you really get the feeling that the more timid one, the Roger Bart character, is the one who is going to have a conscience and maybe try and save the girl instead of kill her, and maybe even die himself, redeeming himself, while doing so. And actually, it's he's
the nasty motherfucker, isn't he?
Yeah, you get that glimpse. It lets you have your cake and eat it too. Really, it gives you that sense of no, you were right to think that. We wanted you to think that, and you get that glimpse of that is what's going to happen. And then it cuts to the other one in the other room, who is so I don't know, sensitive about it. Not in an empathetic sense, but sensitive in quite a pathetic sense, where he sort of, if he can't, she won't shut up and let me do this the way I want to do it. And you're ruining it. That's the idea, that he sort of becomes quite emasculated by how much control she's taking of the situation, even though she's the one strapped to a chair with a gag in her mouth, And so the fact that that's enough to bring him down, emotionally and in terms of his status, says a lot about how hollow that character's power was in the first place. And he ends up being the one that runs away screaming and saying, I can't do this. And then you get the real horror of the company in control of this situation that basically say, the one rule we have is you can't leave them in there alive. You have to kill them. You can do what you want with them, which is horrible to say out loud, but you can do what you want with them, but you have to kill them at the end, because otherwise they can live to tell the tale. And that's the one sort of base of security we have. And he's like, no, forget it. I want my money back. Or even, I don't want my money back. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And so, okay, well, you signed the contract. That means if you're not going to kill her, we're going to kill her, and we're going to kill you. And actually, we're not even going to kill her. We're going to sell her on for a discounted rate to anybody else who wants it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's wild. And is that, if I remember right, that's where you get that fantastic sort of almost montage scene where they offer her to all these other different varying levels of psychopaths, and you get these windows. And I remember the scene where I think you get the cannibal.
Yes, I was waiting for you to bring this up, because having not watched this for 10, 15 years, my memory of the three girls were that their deaths happen in the final act, which is not true. I rewatched it recently. The more timid of the three girls, she gets scythed upside down. Lorna gets scythed upside down over a big bath, where an older woman, who obviously is very vain and proud of her appearance, which is all given without dialogue, totally in the subtext, totally in the casting and the performance, which I think is really well done. She comes in, strips off, lies underneath Lorna. Lorna's begging for her life. Scythes her back, lets a little bit of blood drop on her. She's obviously enjoying, almost drinking the blood, bathing in the blood, enjoying taking her time with Lorna's death, and then finally scything her throat and being showered in her blood. Now that I remembered that vividly from A, the DVD cover, and B, just the fact that was so specific. And every film has seen somebody get stabbed. Every horror film has seen somebody get macheted or beheaded or whatever. That is such a specific thing, and yet doesn't feel convoluted because of the context of this thing. And that's why I think, again, the second film had the confidence to take the thing further, especially because there was no twist left over from the first one. The sort of the reveal of what's going on in the first one is very much at the end. Now that we know what's going on, or it expects you to know what's going on, not that I did, again, I got introduced to this in this film, but it wastes no time with that. And so this happens somewhere in the middle act, in the second act. And there's a few days then where these other two girls are looking for Lorna. So I forgot about that. But my memory of the other two girls were, I remembered that our protagonist tears off her assailant's genitalia and throws it to the dogs. I remembered that. I didn't remember the ins and outs of her buying herself, but I really enjoyed that. That was the sort of air punch moment in this film. That was very good. But I remembered the third one as being the victim of the cannibal, because I had that image in my head of that leg.
The kind of charcuterie board leg.
Yes, charcuterie board leg, salami pants. And it's this guy, it's a man on a table, his leg basically being like carveried down to the bone while he's still alive. And a man just goes up, slices off a little piece of Parma ham, puts it on a plate, goes and sits down and eats it. And that's it. I think it's one shot. I think it's all from sort of this side of the guy who's being, the victim, and then the table in the background, and he just sort of takes it from the foreground, goes and sits in the background and eats it with a little knife and fork as well. He's very sophisticated, very Hannibal Lecter. But yeah, I think that image, that one shot is so powerful that I rewrote it in my head that one of the main three girls had that happen to them. But it's just not. It's one shot, and it's just part, like you said, of that montage where she is being offered at a discounted rate as sort of damaged goods. Yeah. Who wants her? And they put in their bids, and that's how powerful that image is. That pardon the pun, but it fleshes out this world really well, and it gives us a fuller experience of what might go on, what might people use this for. So yeah,
it's just great. World building, isn't it? I think, and I think you can see that there's obviously been like a budgetary uplift from the first.
Oh yeah,
but it gives Roth, I think, a little bit of room to flex, which I think is great. I think they still use like the same set, that amazing kind of sort of disused Soviet style factory as they come in, but it feels like a bigger world. And as you said, with that dual narrative, you can have that, and you can open it up, and it just feels like you can see the delight of, as you said, that scene of them opening up those different doors and these little teases of like...
Yeah, and it's glimpses into how big that world is and how broad a range of things these people are being used for. And I think that's the point, is that I saw the film as saying, you got these three girls and they all die in very different ways. Or rather that they're all bought to be killed or eaten or whatever in all these different ways. So yeah, it's really effective.
Do you want to talk about the kills? Because I feel like every horror fan loves a good kill.
I think so.
And you've already talked about Lorna's, which is that fantastic kind of scythe scene, which I think I read somewhere that was the scene that got it maybe banned, or it had its certificate changed in the UK, or New Zealand banned it or something like that, because it was so sort of kind of visceral, and they used like gallons and gallons of fake blood. Apparently,
I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense.
It. And the next one is Lorna, Whitney, and Beth, isn't it? I think I'm right. And is Whitney the one who survives, or is Beth the one that goes through? I've got to check it.
I mean, this is I watched it a week ago and I've already forgotten. So Beth is our protagonist, and Whitney's the one who gets resold. Yes.
So the Whitney's, I guess it's not really her death, but the kind of the way that she gets damaged is that, as you said, goes back to what you were saying about how pathetic it is as an attempt of, I'm going to, his character is very much, I'm going to try and be a killer. Yeah. And his attempt at doing it is so horrible. And, for those of you who haven't seen it, he tries to kind of drill her head with a power drill, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like we're like traumatizing poor Dav. Yeah. Dav, our lovely producer, is being very slowly traumatized by all these different acts. This is, in a way, a form of Hostel for you, Dav, isn't it? So Whitney, yes, gets her hair. He attempts to kill her with a power drill, isn't it? If I remember.
Yeah, and kind of, I think her hair gets caught in it, and it's sort of not quite how he imagined it, and you see his whole sort of facade crumble, because it's like, no, this isn't, he's a child who's been told that, he's only got 5 minutes left to play with his toys, instead of, this whole thing that he was going to do and this whole plan he had. But it just goes to show that, these types of people, I mean, they are big kids at the end of the day. They're kids that have never been told no. They're having tantrums. They're people who think, well, I've gotten away with strip clubs, so then I must progress to prostitution. I've gotten away with that. So how do I feel more and more and more in control because I can afford to? And yeah, I mean, not that this is a kill, but for me, one of the scariest images, and again, it happens once really quickly, and I remembered it happening differently in my head, but this is how powerful it was. The idea that they hand in their passports at the hostel reception desk, and then he just kind of takes their passports and scans them, which is, I mean, I'm sure hotels do that sometimes, it's a security measure. And I remembered there being this sort of like shot from inside the photocopier, where you see them being scanned and then they go online into this auction. Now, it doesn't actually play out that way in the edit, but that's how it played out in my memory of the scene. But even just that in itself, the idea they scan these passports, the passport image is what goes up for sale, the image, the auction. And then you've just got these, a woman on a golf course, a man, I think the man's on the golf course, the woman in the office, you've got all these sort of Japanese businessmen and all these sort of, your sort of, your stereotypes of these powerful people all around the world kind of going, yeah, I'll pay for her. Yeah. And, and then there's a bracket, like a cost bracket, price bracket for like, depending on the nationality or the hair color, or the eye color, or the skin color, like it's very dehumanizing. And I do feel like that for me was watching it. That might as well have been a murder scene. You kind of, one of the issues I had with the Milk Killers was I had these 4 female characters and they're great and they bounce off each other so well. And as soon as you kind of take one out of the equation, the dynamic sort of changes. And my favorite thing about the Milk Killers is those 4 characters together and how they bounce off each other. So I really didn't want to kill them too early in the film. But I knew that I'd have to at the end. Yeah. So going forward, I'm looking at, bringing in more characters so I can kill them earlier off, so that we can, pacing-wise, put more kills throughout the film. But I think what this film does really well is like scenes like that, like the drill where she doesn't quite die, is treated like a murder scene. So it might as well be another character's murder. Scenes like the charcuterie man is, in a way, it's a kill scene, but it's so visceral and vivid and paints a whole story and a film that we haven't seen. It just, you fill in that gap in your head. And this passport scene felt like I was as horrified as if there had been another murder scene. So considering there's only 3 characters, one of them makes it out alive, the other one dies right before the end, and the other one dies sort of a few scenes earlier. it's fleshed out with these murder equivalent scenes, even though there's no murders happening.
It's the terror, isn't it?
It's the terror. Yeah. It's really impressive.
It's the terror, isn't it? There's this kind of rising terror throughout
Yeah, it's really impressive. Yeah.
And then you also get the fantastic, I guess, comeuppance of these kind of greasy American businessmen as well, which is great.
Yes.
Because the first one gets, you said earlier on, he kind of bottles it and says, I can't do it. And he runs off and is it dogs? They set like a bunch of dogs on him?
So there are dogs set. Well, there are dogs set on him, and the dogs tackle him to the ground, I believe. And then those same dogs are sort of being used to threaten. So that we've seen that, we've had that established, and then the same dogs are being used to threaten the situation at the end with the Roger Bart character and the girl. So
yeah, because he gets arguably, you said it, that punch the air moment. He has probably one of arguably the worst deaths, and gets
Well, talk about emasculating. I mean, that is literally emasculation personified. But I think one of the most surprising deaths of this, and now that this time when I was rewatching it, I watched it straight after the first one, is the Jay Fernandez character from the first. Paxton. Paxton survives the first one. And I did not remember Paxton in the second one at all, because I remembered the three female protagonists. And watching it for the first time in years, I'm going, oh my God, Paxton's in this. I totally forgot Paxton's in this. And they use Paxton as a great way of basically catching you up with what happened in the first film, or at least the parts that you need to know. And sort of going, but obviously it says a lot that I had never seen Hostel Part 2 or Hostel Part 1 when I first watched Hostel Part 2, and didn't feel like, oh, this must be something to do with the first one. Like, it didn't alienate me in that way. It didn't make me feel like I'd missed something, because all it delivered was this character that had this glimpse into this thing that we're about to go into again. It was essentially a cold open to, this could have been not a sequel, but a first film. And it essentially was a cold open, like the Drew Barrymore scene in Scream, or, it was just somebody to kind of introduce you to the concept of what was going on, drop you in media res, in the deep end, and basically to have a kill on screen very early on, very gruesomely, and a decapitation. I mean, it's with a room of heads that we later see. He does back to the and this is something where I think the second one maybe missed a trick, is that one of the scariest things about the first film for me was the facelessness of this operation. And the second one basically starts by saying, this guy is the face of this operation. And now I'm less scared of the guy, because I feel like there's a sense of, if I kill him, I'm free. Not that that's what happens in the film necessarily, but there is that, it just takes that slight edge off. I'm seeing, the more I see the shark in Jaws, the less scared I become of the shark. So it's that. And so that would be the one thing I would say the first film has over the second film, is this sort of faceless. Yes. Yeah. But the first one feels a lot more like Eyes Wide Shut, where even the people that you do see that are involved have masks on, they're faceless. They could be your doctor, your lawyer, it could be anyone or everyone. You could be in the minority here, everybody else could be in on this but you. And that's, to me, much scarier.
I think it's a great sort of statement of intent from Roth, really, because he's, people talk about creatives or directors or writers killing their darlings, and he literally does kill his, the final boy of the first movie is sort of quite literally decapitated, taken out and done away with within the first 5 minutes in that kind of cold open. And it's such a great, I think, quite a ballsy kind of like, this is the type of movie we're in for. No one's safe.
It is, and it sort of says to the audience, I love Hostel as well as you guys. But if you hated Hostel, don't worry, we're kind of killing everything that didn't work about it and keeping everything that did. And that's very much how I feel, because the biggest sort of flaw with both these films, but with Hostel Part 1 in particular, is the insensitivity, the cultural insensitivity, the sort of way it writes off a whole nation or a whole part of the world as sort of sketchy. not for nothing, there is a stereotype there, and you are playing into people's fears, but by then confirming those fears, there's a humanitarian issue there.
Yeah. It's a tightrope to walk, I think, isn't it?
It is, and I think he walks it a lot better in the second one, and I think that's basically what he's saying with the opening scene, is like, don't worry, this is more of the same, but now we're cutting off all the fat. Again, talk about charcuterie, man. We're cutting off all the fat and we're just getting to the meat on the bone, yeah.
I think you nailed it earlier when we said it's that amazing kind of thesis of this is how the West sees these places.
Yeah.
It's a playground,
Yeah.
Even now you go to places like, Bucharest in Romania or Budapest in Hungary or wherever, and you can go and pay like €100 and you can go shoot an AK-47. And that's kind of what this is.
That's what this is, yeah. I mean, we go, pints are cheaper there, which means we can get drunker, we can get rowdier, we can abuse the staff a bit. And how different is that really? How different is what the guys in the first film are doing from what the actual villains of that film are doing? I mean, it's the same mentality, just on a different level, with more money and more power and taking things even further. But really, how different is it? And that's why I think these films work. The girls in the second film, are more sensitive, but it still rides that tightrope act of sort of saying that they are still doing that. It's less irritating to watch.
Yes, yeah.
And because they are less like that, they do deserve, or at least one of them does deserve to sort of take control of the situation and outlive the story. So yeah, no, it holds up a lot better than I thought it would.
They're much more likable, isn't it? Because I think that kind of bro-y American frat boy vibe is kind of like passed on to those evil businessmen, where, as you said, like the girls are kind of like, they're kind of going interrailing, they're having a nice time. It's that very naive,
doing like live painting and stuff.
Yeah.
Very cultured stuff.
They go to like a nice little local, is it like a autumn feast or something? They're drinking mulled wine. It's like a very nice, they don't deserve it.
Crime that Lorna commits is falling in love with a local man and wanting to go for a boat ride.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end of the day, if that isn't cause for being scythed, I don't know what is.
Exactly. Yeah. What can you not do?
How dare she? Yeah.
I think for me, it's just a far more. It shows, I think, as a filmmaker, Roth having this far more muscular and confident view of what horror should be and what his brand of horror should be.
Yeah, and he still sort of veers on the sort of the edgier side than somebody, I would say I like to think I make similar types of films to Eli Roth, but that I definitely am way more sort of scared of veering into that edgy side of, what am I saying here? And so there is a sort of I don't want to say a thoughtlessness, but there is a level of thoughtlessness in what he's doing that frees him up to go to these crazy places. And then he has to kind of clip his wings a little bit just to make sure he isn't crossing those lines himself. But yeah, there's almost a scary element watching an Eli Roth film, because you're going, how far is he going to take this? Not just the characters, but like how far is he as the director going to take this, and I think it lands in a much better place on the second one.
Yeah. And now having, gone back and reevaluated it, were you still scared?
Yeah, do you know what? I think I was. I think it speaks to that human thing. I think it speaks to that, how much of this is actually going on in the world. It leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth, and it does make you look at the world a little bit differently. So I was, I think, like I said, I've been quite desensitized to a lot of like gore and murder, but there are certain scenes where I think just people getting actually hurt and believing that they're getting hurt, it kind of does the work for you, really. You don't need to be I think what Eli Roth does is he kind of cuts through all the tension building, because that kind of comes inherently with the subject matter. And instead he just kind of goes, when it's time to cut to the chase, he cuts to the chase. And if you can scare me even after you've shown me the shark, if you can scare me even after I've sort of seen what's going on and who these people are, and he's sort of humanized these two people that are involved on the other side of it. That says a lot. And I think just people, having things cut off them or things drilled into them, it's convincing enough that I'm going, no. And say what you want about gore films and torture porn and the Saw films and stuff, but like if you're desensitized to the tension building, that stuff is the lifeblood of your sort of being scared experience, and very few films actually do that, I feel, without it just being hollow torture porn.
Yeah. Well, look, Aled, thank you for coming on and talking about Hostel 2. I feel like we've really run the gamut from lads' holidays to charcuterie boards to torture porn and everything in between.
I think so. Yeah, no, it was really nice kind of walking down memory lane a little bit with this. And maybe we'll have to chat about Hostel Part 1.
I think so. Thank you for listening. That was my interview with Aled Owen. If you want to follow and support the show, find us on Patreon.